Hi, I'm Larry from LACMA. I'm a teaching artist, and today I want to share with you an art lesson I kind of developed that involves, actually I was very inspired by an artist, Luchita Hurtado, and I had never heard of her, and it's very interesting. She had a show recently at LACMA, and her work is just amazing, and she actually will turn 100 years old later this year in 2020. She was born in 1920, and she lives an amazing life. She was born in Venezuela, moved to New York as a 8 or 9-year-old girl, then moved on to New Mexico, and then Mexico, and then San Francisco. Now she actually lives in Southern California. So anyway, the art that I really responded to hers was actually her early work from when she was in her 20s, and she did a series of watercolors that were abstract shapes colored in crayon and then painted over with watercolor or ink. And it has this amazing resist. I'm gonna explain more about it during the workshop because it's just amazing. And I really was so inspired that when I saw her work, I went home and I explored doing some similar things. I'll show you a couple of them. This is just crayon shapes, interlocking abstract shapes. I'll talk a little bit more about abstract later, but you can see it's just crayon with watercolor, black watercolor painted over it. Here's another one, interlocking shapes. This, I think I used some blue and black and purple mostly to paint over it in the background. Same with this one. So anyway, I hope you'll enjoy this. Let's jump over to the studio and I'll show you what art supplies you're gonna need. The big reveal. So basically I've made a list here. You can pause while you collect your stuff, but basically you want a pencil to trace your abstract shapes. And when I say abstract, just so it's clear, abstract is kind of the exact opposite of realistic. In other words, if I take a crayon and do a shape like this, not really abstract because it is a heart. If you can call it by name, it probably is an abstract. No, not abstract because it is a star. Not abstract, it's the number 2. So that's what we're going to avoid today. We're going to do shapes that are more biomorphic or geometric, things that don't really represent anything real. So we're going to be collecting these art supplies to get started. You're going to need a pencil to trace your shapes, and you're going to need scissors. You could just tear, but it's better to have some scissors so you can cut some shapes. And then you're going to cut or tear out some just kind of abstract shapes. And actually the ones that I'm going to show you here are just cutaways. I keep a bag full of scraps when I have art classes that, people are using collage. I save the cutaway shapes, and sometimes those shapes are really great to use for abstract art. What else do we need? Crayons. Crayons are made out of wax. They're going to resist or pull away from the watercolor. If you don't have crayons, you could also use oil pastels. They work just as well, actually. They're a little messier to use. Crayons are great. Watercolor paper is ideal because it'll take the paint better or the ink better. So this is kind of, a little bit thicker, better quality paper. You can even hear the difference. Versus thinner, this is just regular printing paper, which you can use as well if that's all you've got. Then you're gonna need watercolor paint, which I got up here. Now, if you don't have any sets of watercolor, probably you can get them at a local drugstore, but if you can't, you could also use food coloring if you have that around the kitchen, or egg dye. You could also use ink, black ink, any kind of colored ink. And then you're gonna need a paintbrush to paint the ink or the watercolor. And definitely will help to have a cup of water. So here's your art supplies. I'll leave that right there. And for now, let's pause and come back. Let's pause and then come back when you're ready to go. Let's get started making the actual art. So I've got a piece of watercolor paper here. Here's the supply list. Hope you got everything you need, or things you can use as alternatives, which are written in the red. Anyway, I have got, actually the first thing I want to do is, because we're going to be painting over the crayon, we'll do the dry part, the crayon first, and then obviously the wet part afterwards. But what I like to do, just so you don't get paint all over the table and have a big mess to clean up, I always like to put a border around the art. So I'm going to use a blue crayon, and I'm just gonna, I'm pressing kind of hard because I want to put some wax down, but the idea is I'm not going to do anything with the crayons or the watercolor outside of this border. It's all going to be inside the border, kind of like how a dollar bill has the clean border. We're going to keep that, all that edge clean, and only work inside the middle. And then I've got some of these shapes that I showed you earlier, and I'm just going to kind of play around with them, kind of come up with a design. And actually, just to show you, if you don't have shapes cut yet, you could tear some shapes, or I'm just going to cut it swirly, curly, I don't know, you know, try not to keep it looking like something. We want to keep it abstract just so we don't get hung up on it's a painting of something. So I'm just gonna, and the other thing is, you know, we can overlap these, and keep in mind these pieces of cutouts are not going to even be part of the finished art. They're just going to be templates that we're going to trace. I like this big shape. So you know what, I think I'm going to start with this big shape and make it kind of emerging from the bottom. And maybe I'll do brown on this one. Now, if you don't want to directly, like, you know, I'm using a crayon directly, but if you want, I'll switch to a pencil. So, you know, I'm just tracing. Doesn't have to be perfect. You can deviate, make your own thing, like I'm going to go out and make an extra thing over there, for instance. See what I just did? Doesn't have to be exact. They're abstract. There is no right or wrong with this. Just having fun, playing around with abstract shapes. He's got these cool holes in the middle. There's one there. There's one there. So now, I got our first shape. And then, you know, spend some time. Play around with them. Oh, I like that. Oh, I do like that. I'm gonna go back to tracing it with crayons so it's easier for you guys to see, but you can start doing this with pencil if you want. So here I've got these shapes, and white, this is interesting. If you do white, like let's say I'm gonna do white, maybe I'm gonna color in, see I'm coloring in this shape white, and obviously it's invisible now. You're not seeing it because when I'm pressing so hard, I just broke the crayons. Now I never worry about breaking crayons. I'm using brand new crayons just to impress all of you. The crayons I normally use are broken up and crazy. But I'm pressing hard, and when I paint over that, that white is gonna pop out. But you know, some of these other shapes, maybe this one, is gonna be bright magenta. Okay, so now I'm gonna get this stuff out of the way, and I'll show you how easy it is to just paint over the whole thing. So now you could just paint the whole thing with one solid color. Black is usually very dramatic because it really shows how bright the colors are. But I like to sometimes mix it up and do some cool stuff. So I'm gonna do, and actually when you're, probably already know this, but if you're using watercolor, because you have to rinse your brush off in the water between colors, it helps if you use the lighter colors first and then purple and black, maybe use them at the very end. These are the dark ones, the black at the very end and the purple. So I'm gonna use some lighter colors first. Maybe I will use some green. And because this is green paint, getting a lot of paint in the brush. Now the trick with this resist thing is you got to get the paint, a lot of color in it, but with with enough water in it so it doesn't start getting sticky. They're called watercolors, not honey colors. So if you feel your brush dragging through the paint, it means there's not enough water. But you want to get a nice lot of paint. And the trick with this is to not go back and forth too many times. Once the paper starts getting too wet, the crayon resist part doesn't happen as well. So I'm just gonna go barely touching. We pressed really hard with the crayons. Now we're gonna press very soft with the watercolor. Now I'm gonna rinse my brush off, but can you see how it's kind of pulling away from the, and I got a napkin here. Remember I did that shape white, so I'm gonna pull a little bit of that up with there. And then maybe I'll switch to purple. A little bit more paint in here. But see how it beads up on the crayon? That's the fun part. But see how it's beading away? That's what you want to happen. You paint over it and it beads up because the crayon is resisting. Voila. So thanks so much for joining in today, and I hope you had a great time making crayon watercolor resist art. Just wanted to say, if you did anything today that you like, post it. Please post haste post to LACMA at LACMA. And just to really close, I'd like to just show you a couple of more examples of artwork that I've done with kids that involves the same material, but more representational instead of being abstract. So this is portraits of face, symmetrical face, same on the left as it is on the right with crayon and watercolor. Here's an example that I had shown them. And then this is another fun one where we explored concentric shapes, which is kind of just shapes that pool, they repeat and kind of pool and radiate in and out. That's also, these are all just crayon with watercolor painted over, just more depicting reality. I love this one, primary shapes, circles, squares, triangles to create outer space. And I will finish with this one, this beautiful heart. So please join us again and make art, and keep on making art. Thank you.